Julius Malema was found guilty last year of firing a gun into the air at a public rally. Now, that part of the story is over, but what isn't over and what could determine the future of the EFF is what sentence he receives. You see, Malema was back in court this week, not to argue innocence, but to find out whether his guilty verdict ends with a fine, prison time, or something far more politically explosive. Now that distinction matters. This latest appearance wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was a pre-sentencing hearing where the court heard arguments about how Malema should be punished. And after reviewing the arguments from all sides, the magistrate decided to push the decision out to April, extending a process that has already been stretched out over months. But this is where things get interesting. You see, the stakes go far beyond one man's legal fate. Under South African law, if Malema receives a custodial sentence of more than 12 months without the option of a fine, and that sentence survives appeal, he would be automatically disqualified from Parliament. That would remove him as an MP overnight and push the EFF into uncharted territory, raising questions that it's never had to ask before. Who leads, who holds the party together, and how a movement built around disruption adapts when its central force is suddenly removed. So that's why this sentencing is such a loaded moment. If Malema receives a sentence that removes him from Parliament, it won't just be a legal outcome, or will be a political shockwave. I mean, think about it. How do his supporters respond? How does the EFF regroup without its central figure? And how do rival parties and former allies adjust when one of South Africa's most disruptive political players is suddenly sidelined? We're about 80 days away from finding out. So if that's how the EFF's week is shaping up, South Africa's car industry is about to go through its own major shift. For the past few years, Chery has been one of the fastest rising car brands in South Africa, winning buyers over with sharp prices, long feature lists, and steadily improving quality. Now it is taking that next step in that evolution. Chery is no longer just selling cars in South Africa anymore. It's going to start making them here too. Now, the deal itself is fairly straightforward. Subject to regulatory approval, Chery South Africa will buy Nissan's Rosslyn plant in mid-2026. Now, most of Nissan's workers at the plant are expected to be taken on by Chery on similar terms, while Nissan will wind down local Navara production later this year and fully shift to imports. Now, Chery hasn't confirmed which models will be built here yet, but production could begin as early as 2027. But what makes this move so interesting is just the backdrop that it's happening against. You see, Chinese brands like Chery have been clear winners for buyers. Cheaper prices, better value, more choice. But that surge has also put real pressure on South Africa's existing car manufacturing plants, where thousands of jobs depend on keeping those production lines busy. But by starting to build cars locally, Chery is now stepping into that tension directly. It's no longer just influencing what South Africans buy, it's beginning to shape what gets built here too. So while that plays out on factory floors, the same calculation, where to grow, how much control to take, is reshaping the country's banking landscape too. Nedbank is back at the table, sleeves rolled up and wallet open. After a pretty disastrous exit from EcoBank, the bank has now gotten back on the horse and doubled down on two very different and very deliberate plays, signaling a clear shift in how it wants to grow. So the biggest came this month when Nedbank announced plans to buy a controlling stake of around 66% in NCBA Group for roughly 14 billion rand, a deal that would give it control of one of East Africa's largest banking groups. Before that, it snapped up 100% of iKhokha, a fast-growing payments company focused on small businesses. Now, very different markets, different price tags, but the same approach of full control. Now, that matters because control cuts both ways. Analysts noted how Nedbank's exit from EcoBank was, in part, a lesson in the limits of minority ownership, specifically limited influence. Now, these deals flip that equation. By taking control, Nedbank gains both strategic direction and decision-making power, but it also takes on full responsibility for execution. Either way, after stepping back and taking the hit, Nedbank now appears more comfortable with both owning the upside and the risk. Whether that confidence is rewarded is yet to be seen. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, former President Thabo Mbeki has claimed that apartheid-era security structures were secretly reactivated to boost the MK party in the 2024 election, an allegation that the party rejects, saying that voters simply turned against the ANC. Trueworth says that credit sales are slipping while cash purchases rise as squeezed consumers just spend less overall. Now, as a result of that, the retailer's credit book is shrinking, earnings growth is capped, and the UK business isn't strong enough to offset the pressure at home. And inside the DA, Siviwe Gwarube is being lobbied for a senior leadership role ahead of April's federal conference, as Helen Zille prepares to step aside to focus on her campaign for Joburg mayor. And on to our bagel bite of the day. But first, just a side note, if you are enjoying the show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe so you never miss the stories that matter. Furthermore, if you do prefer your news on the go, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Links to both of those are either in our description below or our bio. Now, with that out of the way, let's see what you got. The question is, what is the name of the chemical process that turns grapes into wine? Is it A, distillation, B, oxidation, or C, fermentation? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. When countries pick a national animal, it's meant to say something about who they are: strength, speed, resilience. Now, South Africa chose the springbok for reasons that we discussed earlier this week, but elsewhere, the symbolism gets interesting. Starting with Scotland, my personal favorite, whose national animal is the unicorn. No, not a metaphorical nickname, the actual mythical creature. It was chosen to symbolize purity, independence, and power that refuses to be controlled. A very Scottish statement given its history with England. Australia went more literal with technically two national animals, the kangaroo and the emu, neither of which can walk backwards. Now, that was intentional. They were chosen to represent a country that only moves forward. Subtle but deliberate. And then there's Costa Rica, whose national animal is the three-toed sloth, known for being slow, quiet, and relaxed. Now, it seems like an unusual choice, but it's one that mirrors a country better known for conservation and tranquility than military parades. All in all, national animals aren't necessarily about nature, they're about identity and symbolism. And look, as impressive as a flying horse may be, I'll take the springbok any day of the week. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is fermentation. Yeast consumes the sugars in grapes and produces alcohol as a byproduct. Now, this miraculous outcome depends less on intervention and more on timing and careful control. There's a lot of lessons in that. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys all had a rejuvenating weekend and wishing you all a fantastic Monday ahead. Remember, be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.